My wife divorced me by email while I was deployed overseas and emptied our joint account. Please stay with us for more interesting stories. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel. Liking our videos and sharing with your loved ones is worth for us. Your support means your love for us. My wife divorced me by email while I was deployed overseas and emptied our joint account. I still remember the exact day. The sun was brutal. The dust in the air felt like it was glued to my skin, and all I wanted was the comfort of home. I was a staff sergeant, halfway through my deployment in the Middle East, counting the months, weeks, and even days until I could finally go back. Every night I pictured walking into my house, hugging my wife, and finally getting to live like a normal man again. That image was what kept me steady when the nights got long and the heat felt endless. Then came the email. It wasn't long. It wasn't kind. It wasn't even human. Just a few cold sentences typed out as if I were nothing more than a number on her contact list. Jessica told me she had filed for divorce. Not only that, but she had drained our joint savings account. $42,000 gone in a blink. No explanation, no warning, no phone call, just a blunt digital dagger to the chest. I read it over and over, thinking maybe I had misunderstood. But the words stayed the same each time, hitting harder than any punch I'd ever taken. My hands shook, my stomach turned, and I felt the ground drop from under me. I was thousands of miles away, in uniform, serving my country, while the person I trusted most cut my legs out from under me. The helplessness was the worst. Back home, she was moving money, changing her life, making choices that ripped mine apart, while I sat in a tent halfway across the world, staring at a screen I wished I could throw against the wall. I couldn't fight it, couldn't run to a lawyer, couldn't even get a straight answer from her. It was betrayal in its rawest form. That night I couldn't sleep. My brothers in arms noticed right away. They asked if I was good, but I couldn't even form words. How do you explain that the person who promised forever just erased you like an old note? I laid on my cot, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it. The woman who once said she'd wait for me, who said she believed in me, had decided I was disposable. I felt rage, sadness, and an emptiness I can't describe. But mixed with all that pain, something else started to take shape inside me. A small spark, quiet but steady. She thought she had ended me with one email, but what she didn't realize was that she had set something else in motion. What she feared most wasn't me leaving, it was me standing back up. She thought she'd walked away with everything. But the truth? She had just started a war she could never win. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I met Jessica in North Carolina, a couple of years before I was set to deploy. Back then, she was all warmth and charm, the kind of woman who could light up a room with a smile. She had this way of making me feel like I was the only man alive, like my uniform meant something bigger than just a job. I was young, focused on my career, and when she stepped into my life, I thought I had found someone who understood the sacrifices that came with it. In the beginning, she played the role perfect. She told me she admired the discipline, the structure, the long hours I put in. She'd sit on the porch with me on late evenings, talking about the future, nodding like she was ready to stand beside me no matter how tough it got. She even told my buddies she couldn't wait to be a military wife, proud of what that meant, eager to wear that title as if it was a badge. Those early days felt solid. It seemed like we were building something that would last. But time has a way of showing you who someone really is. Slowly, the support turned into small sighs when I mentioned long training days. The sweet words grew shorter, less patient, more clipped. I would notice her staring a little too long at things she wanted but knew we couldn't afford. First, it was clothes and handbags, then new furniture, then vacations that didn't make sense for our budget. Money became her favorite topic, and not in the way most couples talk about saving or planning. It was more like she couldn't stand waiting for what she thought she deserved. She started comparing us to others, friends who weren't tied to the military, women who had husbands home every night, couples who seemed to have more freedom, more cash. I could see her bitterness grow every time I had to leave for training or when I couldn't spend as much as she wanted. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about keeping her satisfied, and nothing I did seemed to be enough. The small cracks widened fast. Arguments about bills turned into her blaming me for the life she had chosen. She'd toss around words like sacrifice and loneliness, as if she were the only one paying a price. When I tried to remind her why I was doing all of it, for both of us, she would roll her eyes, change the subject, or bring up some new complaint. It was as if the man she had once said she admired became the very thing she resented. My family noticed before I wanted to admit it. My mom, especially, never seemed fully at ease around Jessica. She told me once that she couldn't shake the feeling Jessica was more interested in what I could provide than in who I was. My sister Megan didn't hide her suspicions either. She'd point out how Jessica always talked about money, or how she seemed restless when the spotlight wasn't on her. I brushed those comments aside, thinking they just didn't understand her the way I did. But deep down, I had already started to feel it. The shift, the coldness, the way love was being replaced by something sharp and selfish. I told myself it was just stress, that every marriage had struggles. I convinced myself that once deployment was over, things would smooth out. I wanted to believe the woman I met was still in there somewhere. What I didn't know was that those cracks were more than just temporary stress. They were warnings of something bigger, something I refused to see until it was too late. Deployment was nothing like home. The days bled into each other, long patrols in the scorching heat, the dust sticking to our skin, the constant weight of gear on our shoulders. Nights were only slightly better, when we'd sit around after chow, swapping stories, laughing at dumb jokes just to forget where we were. That brotherhood was the only thing that kept most of us sane. Out there, you learned to trust the man beside you with your life, because sometimes that trust was the only thing standing between you and not making it back. Even in the middle of all that, I held on to my connection with Jessica. At first, her emails came often, sometimes full of little updates about the house or things she'd seen in town. I clung to those messages. They made the distance feel smaller, like I could still picture her waiting for me. But as the months dragged on, her words started to change. The warmth in her notes faded. They got shorter, almost rushed, like writing to me was a chore she had to squeeze in between more important things. Instead of telling me how she was doing, she began asking for money more often. At first, it was little things, a bill here, some extra for groceries. Then it turned into complaints about what we didn't have, about how hard it was for her to keep up with everything. I reminded her that I was sending what I could, that we had to be careful, but she didn't want to hear it. Soon, every message carried a sharper tone. She started throwing the word lonely around, not as something she was sharing with me, but as an accusation, like I had chosen to leave her behind. When I tried to explain that being away was part of the life we both signed up for, she twisted it into another fight. It didn't matter that I was risking my life every day. She wanted more, and no answer from me seemed good enough. I told myself she was just stressed. I wanted to believe the pressure was getting to her, that once I came home we'd reset and fix what was broken. But the more I tried to reassure her, the colder she became. Arguments about money became a routine. She'd ask why I couldn't send more, why we weren't saving enough, why she had to struggle while I was off doing my thing. Every word stung, but I bit my tongue. I was thousands of miles away. Fighting over email felt pointless. Then one day, her messages just stopped. No explanation, no warning. At first, I thought it was a fluke. Maybe she was busy. Maybe something came up. But a day turned into a week, and then weeks stretched on without a single line from her. I checked my inbox every chance I got, waiting, convincing myself she'd write soon. She didn't. That silence hit harder than the dust, the heat, or even the missions. Out there, surrounded by brothers who counted on me every day, I had never felt so alone. Deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't want to face what it meant. The email came late in the evening, after a long patrol that had already drained me to the bone. I opened it like I had done so many times before, expecting a few cold lines from Jessica. Instead, what I read knocked the air right out of me. She told me she had filed for divorce. No hesitation, no kindness, just a statement of fact. Along with it came the blow that she had emptied our joint account, more than $42,000, gone in a single move. The reason she wrote down for the divorce was irreconcilable differences. Cold words on a screen, ending years of promises in a way that felt mechanical, heartless. The shock hit first. My body went stiff, my mind racing as if maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe this was some kind of twisted joke. But the numbers she wrote down matched exactly what I knew we had. She hadn't just walked away. She had stripped me clean and made sure there was nothing left for me to hold on to. And then came the second hit. She told me she had already changed the locks on our house. My own home was no longer mine. She had cut me off completely, as if I were some stranger. Everything I thought was safe waiting for me back in the States. Gone with one email. I sat there staring at the screen for what felt like hours. The sounds of the bass blurred into the background. All I could feel was betrayal, heavy and sharp, running deeper than anything I had ever known. It wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about realizing that maybe she never cared about me at all. Maybe it was always about what I could provide, the stability, the paycheck, the image of being married to a soldier. And once she decided that wasn't enough, she discarded me like I was nothing. Word spread fast among the guys. They saw it in my face before I even said a word. One by one, they came by, offering me a beer, a seat, a distraction. They didn't sugarcoat it. Most of them told me straight that she wasn't worth it, that she was trash for doing this to me while I was out here risking everything. We sat around, talking less than usual, but their presence mattered. It reminded me that not everyone would abandon you when life got ugly. Still, the nights were brutal. Laying on my cot, I replayed every memory, every promise she ever made, and they all felt fake now. That realization broke something inside me. The woman I once thought I knew had never truly been mine. She was only there for what she could take. But beneath the hurt, something else began to build. A quiet fire started burning, steady and focused. She thought she had ended me, that by draining the account and shutting me out of the house, she had taken everything. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. If she believed she could walk away without consequence, she was wrong. In that moment, I made myself a promise. If Jessica thought she was walking away with everything, she didn't know who she married. Coming home was nothing like I imagined. I had spent months picturing the moment, stepping off the plane, breathing in the air of home, and feeling relief. Instead, what I walked into was silence. My apartment was empty, stripped down to bare walls and leftover scraps of a life I no longer recognized. Waiting for me on the kitchen counter was a pile of envelopes, letters from lawyers, notices, paperwork that made the reality impossible to ignore. Jessica hadn't just left. She had erased me from the life we once shared. The first few days were the hardest. Jet lag and the weight of everything I had lost pressed down on me until I could barely get out of bed. But I wasn't completely alone. My sister Megan showed up the very next day, arms full of groceries, her voice sharp with anger on my behalf. She sat with me, helped me sort through the mess of legal papers, and reminded me that I wasn't broken beyond repair. A few of my close friends came by too, offering company, trying to pull me out of the fog. Their support mattered more than they knew. Still, the sting of betrayal deepened when I saw how Jessica was living. She didn't waste any time hiding it. Word spread quick in town. She was already with someone else, a local contractor named Ryan. They were out together in public, smiling, acting as if nothing had happened. She paraded her new life as if I had never existed. Every time I heard her name or saw a picture of her with him, the rage hit me like a wave. It would have been easy to lose control, to lash out, to do something reckless. But I didn't. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, to think. I had seen enough in my life to know that anger rarely solved anything. What I needed wasn't revenge born out of rage. It had to be precise, measured, the kind of response that couldn't be undone. Jessica thought I would roll over, that I would sign the papers and let her walk away with everything she took. That thought became fuel. Each night, I sat with the documents, reading them line by line, highlighting the pieces that didn't add up. I began writing down every detail I could remember, where our money had gone, what she had bought, every decision she had made while I was gone. It wasn't about clinging to the past. It was about building a clear picture of the kind of person she really was. Megan noticed the shift in me. One night, she asked what I was planning. I didn't give her the full answer, but I told her this much. I wasn't going to let Jessica get away with everything. Not this time. She had taken enough, but now it was my turn to take back control. I wasn't going to rush. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I was going to move carefully, piece by piece, until the life Jessica thought she had built came crashing down around her. Quietly, I began to plan my response. Not out of impulse. Out of precision. The first real step I took after settling back was hiring a lawyer. His name was Mark Allison, a man with sharp eyes and a calm voice that carried confidence. From the moment I sat across from him in his office, I felt like I had finally found someone who wasn't going to let Jessica walk all over me. I handed him the stack of papers and explained what had happened. He read through everything quietly, pausing here and there, and when he finally looked up, he gave a small nod. "She made mistakes," he said, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Jessica thought I wouldn't fight. She thought that being overseas had left me too tired, too beaten down to stand up for myself. What she didn't know was that Mark had already spotted gaps in her paperwork. She hadn't disclosed everything, certain assets, small accounts, and property details she had tried to brush aside, probably assuming I'd never notice. Mark explained that draining our joint savings the way she did wasn't just unfair, it was misconduct. Courts didn't take kindly to one spouse wiping out shared funds without consent. As we went over the details, I felt relief knowing I wasn't walking into this alone. What Jessica also didn't realize was that I had set aside part of my re-enlistment bonus before I ever left. I had kept it in a separate account under my name only, just as a precaution. She had no idea it existed, and that money gave me leverage. I wasn't broke, no matter how she wanted to paint me. Mark moved quickly. He filed motions, pulled financial records, and began laying out a clear picture of what Jessica had done. The more he uncovered, the worse it looked for her. She had spent large chunks of the joint account on herself, clothes, trips, and things that had nothing to do with household expenses. On paper, it was clear. She hadn't just left me. She had tried to strip me clean and live large on money that wasn't hers alone. The depositions came next. Sitting across from her in that room was surreal. Jessica walked in dressed like she wanted to prove how well she was doing. But the moment the questions began, her confidence started to crack. Mark was steady, polite, but relentless. He asked about the accounts, about her purchases, about the timing of her decisions. I sat there, listening as her answers grew weaker, full of half-truths and excuses that didn't hold up. I didn't say much during those sessions. I didn't need to. Watching her squirm under the pressure was enough. Every lie she tried to spin unraveled as Mark presented the evidence. The more she struggled, the clearer it became that she had underestimated. Walking out of that room afterward, I felt a shift. For months, I had been the one left powerless, blindsided by her betrayal. Now, the tide was turning. She wasn't in control anymore. The truth was on my side, and with Mark leading the charge, I knew she was about to face consequences she never saw coming. Jessica had walked into this whole thing thinking I would roll over and accept whatever she threw my way. She believed I'd sign the papers quietly and disappear while she enjoyed her new life. What she didn't count on was subpoenas landing in her mailbox and court dates filling her calendar. Mark made sure every move was precise, and soon, she was no longer in control of the story. The hearings began, and with them came the weight of accountability. Jessica had to produce records, bank statements, and receipts. Every transaction she thought would stay hidden was dragged into the light. She hated it, and I could see it on her face every time she sat across from me in the courtroom. She wasn't the confident woman she tried to portray. She was cornered. Then came Ryan. He probably thought he was just dating a woman who had broken free from a marriage. But the moment Jessica tied her finances to his, even loosely, he got pulled into the mess. Subpoenas touched his accounts, and suddenly, his money was under question too. He showed up in court with a stiff jaw, trying to play it cool, but it was clear he hadn't signed up for this. Watching him realize that Jessica's baggage had now become his was its own kind of justice. Through it all, I stayed calm. I didn't raise my voice, didn't glare, didn't act out. I let Mark do the work, and I presented myself exactly as I was, the man who had been betrayed, drained, and left to pick up the pieces. The judges and attorneys saw it for themselves. Jessica tried to spin her version, painting herself as the one who suffered, but the evidence didn't lie. Her spending habits came out in the open. Thousands of dollars on clothes, weekends away, and dinners that couldn't be explained as anything but indulgence. Then came the harder hit, the timeline of her relationship with Ryan. Emails, messages, and receipts showed she had been with him before the divorce papers were even filed. What she had tried to hide was now part of the record. The ruling didn't give me everything, but it gave me enough. The court ordered partial restitution of the money she had taken, acknowledging her misconduct. On top of that, I gained leverage over the property she thought was hers to keep. The house she once flaunted as part of her new beginning was no longer fully in her control. I didn't smile in the courtroom. I didn't need to. Watching her sit there, realizing that her fresh start was crumbling piece by piece, was more satisfying than anything I could have said. The image she had tried to build, happy, secure, untouchable, was falling apart right in front of her. By the time we walked out of the courthouse, the power she once held over me was gone. Her perfect new life wasn't looking so perfect anymore. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the balance shift back into my hand. The final hearing came after months of back and forth. By then, I had learned to walk into that courthouse steady, calm, and prepared. Jessica, on the other hand, looked worn down. The shine she once carried was gone. She sat across from me, flipping through papers with shaking hands, trying to look confident, but the cracks were clear. When the judge read the decision, it felt like the air shifted in the room. The court granted me the majority of our marital assets, including the house Jessica had convinced herself she would keep. She had spoken about that house as if it was already hers alone, but in the end, her actions caught up to her. The judge didn't buy her excuses, didn't fall for her attempts to twist the story. All he saw was the evidence, how she drained the money, how she tried to hide her tracks, and how she carried herself with entitlement instead of honesty. The look on her face when the words were spoken was something I'll never forget. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but no sound came out. She shifted in her seat, glancing toward her attorney, hoping for some miracle that wasn't coming. Then came the part she didn't expect, Ryan walking away. The moment the financial storm grew too heavy, he was gone. He didn't stand by her, didn't fight beside her. He slipped out of her life quietly, leaving her to face the mess she created. I heard later that he had already started distancing himself when the subpoenas began, but seeing it confirmed hit her harder than anything else. Jessica tried one last time to sway the judge. She spoke about how hard things had been for her, how she only wanted stability, how she didn't mean for it to go this far. Her voice cracked as she pleaded, but the judge's face stayed firm. He had seen enough manipulation in that courtroom to know what was real and what wasn't. Her words held no weight anymore. I stayed still, hands folded, not giving her the reaction she wanted. No gloating, no anger, no satisfaction shown. I let the court handle it. Inside, though, I felt it, justice. Not revenge in the wild sense, not some loud victory, but the quiet kind that sinks deep and settles a man's soul. When it was over, she walked out of the courthouse with her head down, nearly broke, stripped of the image she had tried to project. She had thought she could rebuild her life on what she took from me, but instead, she stood with nothing but the consequences of her choices. I walked out steady, not triumphant, but at peace. She had gambled everything on the idea that I would fall apart, and she lost. And while I didn't smile, inside I knew this truth. Justice had been served, and she was the one left carrying the weight of it. Life after the courtroom felt strange at first. For months, everything had revolved around legal battles, paperwork, and the weight of betrayal. When it was finally over, I found myself standing in my own space again, quiet and free of her shadow. The house was mine, but it didn't feel like home right away. It was stripped bare, holding the emptiness she had left behind. I started small. A new couch, a table, a bed that was mine alone. Each piece of furniture I brought in wasn't just about comfort. It was about reclaiming my space. Slowly, the house began to feel less like a reminder of her and more like a fresh start. I painted walls, rearranged rooms, and made choices for myself, not for someone else's approval. Every change was a step forward, proof that I could rebuild. Reconnecting with family helped even more. My mom visited often, filling the kitchen with the smell of her cooking, the kind that carried memories of simpler times. Megan was around too, dropping by to check on me, bringing laughter back into the rooms that had been silent for too long. She had stood by me through the worst of it, and now she made sure I didn't forget that life could still hold good moments. Sitting around the table with them reminded me that not everyone leaves, not everyone betrays. In time, I eased myself back into dating, but I did it carefully. I wasn't searching for a replacement, and I wasn't rushing into anything. Coffee meetups, simple conversations, nothing more at first. I found myself listening closely, paying attention not just to what was said but to the honesty behind it. Loyalty and truth became more important to me than anything else. I wasn't bitter, I was cautious. Jessica had taught me to pay attention, to look past charm and promises, to see what was real. At night, I often thought about the lessons all of this had forced on me. The military had always trained me to push through hardship, to stay resilient no matter how heavy the load. But betrayal was a different kind of battlefield. It taught me vigilance, to guard not just my body but my trust. I realized that strength wasn't just about standing tall against enemies you could see. It was also about staying steady when the blow came from someone you thought was on your side. One evening, Megan and I sat out on the porch, the air cool and quiet around us. She looked at me and said she was proud, not just because I got through it, but because I handled it with precision. Most people would have let rage eat them alive, she told me. But you didn't. You were smarter than that. Her words stuck with me. I hadn't come out of this untouched, but I had come out stronger, calmer, and more deliberate. The pieces of my life were back in my hands, and I was shaping them on my own terms. For the first time in a long while, I felt steady. I didn't realize how far I had come until I walked past the old house one last time. It was a cool afternoon, the kind where the air feels calm, almost forgiving. A moving truck sat out front, and strangers carried out the last of Jessica's belongings. Boxes stacked high, furniture wrapped in blankets. Pieces of a life she once thought would be permanent. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just watching. There was no anger left in me. No need to yell, no need to gloat. The woman who tried to break me had already done enough damage to herself. She thought she could take everything, drain me dry, and walk into a new life without consequence. But what she really did was free me. She unchained me from a marriage built on lies, and in her greed, she handed me a chance to start over stronger than before. Seeing those movers haul away her things didn't hurt. It felt final. The weight I had carried for so long was gone. I wasn't standing there as the man she betrayed. I was standing there as the man who survived it, rebuilt, and came out ahead. Financially, I was stable. Emotionally, I was grounded. She, on the other hand, was left with nothing but regret. The house she thought was hers, the money she thought she had won, the relationship she flaunted, all gone. That was the quiet revenge. I didn't need to raise my voice or seek chaos. My life itself became the answer. I was still here, standing tall, surrounded by people who truly cared about me, with the future wide open in front of me. Jessica's choices had cost her everything, while mine had given me a second chance. I turned away from the house after a while, the sound of boxes thudding onto the truck fading behind me. I didn't look back. There was no reason to. That chapter was closed, sealed tight. My story didn't end with her betrayal. It began there. Some betrayals cut deep, but the sweetest revenge is living well. And trust me, I'm just getting started.